Hey, welcome back to Pianist Academy and the Soundboard. I'm Charles Stepanek, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming phenomenal pianist, teacher, business owner, and friend of mine, Dr. Karali Hunter. Dr. Hunter gave her Carnegie Hall debut in 2011. She's a prize winner in numerous competitions, and she was awarded the Star Award in 2008 by the Music Teachers National Association. And she's a regular guest, giving master classes and judging at festivals and competitions around the Western United States. I first met Karali back in 2010 when we sat next to one another for a music repertoire class at Arizona State University. And 12 years ago feels like both yesterday and such a long time ago. Karali, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, happy to be here. 12 years ago.
12, yeah. I know, I can't even believe it. It's good memories though, right?
Absolutely.
We have so much to talk about today, from teaching to managing a family and being a professional musician and even more stuff than that. But why don't we start off today just by getting to know you a little bit better. So could you tell us how you got interested in playing the piano to begin with when you were younger, and then later on what led you to choose to study music and piano at the collegiate level and then beyond that?
Ooh, okay. Let me dig into this. So I am one of 7 children. And my mom grew up, taking music lessons. She played piano, but she actually chose to focus on the flute. Mm-hmm. And then when she married my dad, they actually lived in this incredibly tiny farm town in Idaho. My dad's a farmer, and so that was kind of the lifestyle. But I was the 5th child, and my mom had all my other siblings taking piano lessons because that was one of her. That was important to her. Yeah. So then I came along. I'm number 5, and I see all my older sisters. There was 5 girls in a row. I see all the older sisters playing the piano, and that's just what we did. So there wasn't a do you want to take piano? No, I saw sisters doing it, and I just joined in. And so,
how old is your oldest sister?
My oldest sister is...
Or how much older?
She's about 10 years older than me, maybe more, 10 to 12. I have to think about that.
So she was probably playing somewhat advanced stuff, like for as long as you can remember.
My sister didn't do a lot with it, but it was actually the second oldest. She was playing fairly advanced stuff. And then, by the time I was 3 and 4 years old, I'm starting to just pick out the melodies of things that my sisters are playing, things that I heard at church. And my mom's like, oh, here we go.
It's another one.
So, yeah. And then I'm fairly competitive by nature. I think you kind of have to be in this business.
Yeah.
So then I wanted to be just like my sisters, and I thought I would be so cool if I could play what they were playing. The logic.
Sure. No, really I totally get that.
Yeah. And so it just became kind of an obsession. I just wanted to be as good as them and good, and so I would work longer. I would work harder. Because I grew up around it completely from before I was born. It just, I had a lot of innate ear training that happened, and
just without even really thinking about it, probably.
Yeah. And so before long, my older sisters got older and into high school, and they started dropping out, and I just kept plowing forward. And we did. My mom was awesome. She would drive us into the nearest town, which was Rexburg, an hour away, and anyway, she gave us all the opportunities that she could living where we lived. And eventually we moved to a little bit bigger area. Mm-hmm. So in high school, I was able to have the opportunity to study with a couple of, community college and university professors that said, and they kind of showed me where I could go with it and what I could do.
Mm-hmm. And about how old were you at that point?
Let's see. We moved to the bigger area when I hit junior high. So I was 11 or 12, right in that.
Sure.
So, you got to find a new studio and everything. And so, by the time I hit high school, I was starting to really hit my groove, and I just couldn't imagine stopping.
Sure. This is crazy. We've actually never talked about this, but our stories are uncannily similar.
No way.
I don't have that many siblings, but I do have an older sister who's 8 years older than me, and she played the piano. And Even before that, my dad bought my mom a baby grand for their second anniversary. Now, this was a long time before me. Like, and then they had my sister, and then she started playing, and then 8 years later, they had me. And so music was always in the house, and she was always taking lessons, and I would hear her practice all day, and I would, because I was so young, I would go with my mom and sit in the music studio and hear everybody playing and everybody taking lessons. Yeah, no, it's kind of this. I'm super competitive.
I know. In order to do what you and I have done, you got to have a bit of that at least.
And like maybe it's similar for you. Like I was, even though I was 8 years behind, I felt like I wanted to catch up as fast as possible. That
was the story of my undergraduate degree.
Oh wow! Okay.
I got out of small town Idaho. Went to Provo, Utah, which isn't that much bigger than Provo, but I started to hear these amazing kids that had grown up in, around Salt Lake City and around Provo, with these amazing, Utah has a really great tradition of amazing piano teacher.
Music in general there. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so I started to see all of these students, and I was just like, I can do that. I don't sound like that yet, but I want to. And it fueled my entire undergrad and almost everything.
So when you were in high school, did you know right away? Like when did you find out that you were going to take auditions to become a performance major? Did you like have to make a decision, or was it just like this is it and I know for sure?
That's really funny because like I read a time capsule from 6th grade.
Oh yeah.
When I graduated, and it was like, I'm going to study piano in college and get a scholarship. And I'm going to tell you right now, I had no idea what I was even talking about. And no idea what it even meant. I'm not even sure I really knew what scholarships were at that point.
Right.
And so all through high school, I was just, my teacher wasn't really prepared for a lot of this either, my regular teacher. And so we kind of figured a lot of it out together as we went along.
Okay, yeah.
She was actually working on her master's degree while I was in high school.
In piano.
And so in piano.
Okay, nice. So she had at least been through the process.
Yeah. But she was also like in her 40s or 50s at that point. So she had done an undergrad in music when she was younger, and then taught for years and years, and then decided to get a master's. So things had really changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I kind of always knew people had just, between competitions and things like that, people have been like, oh, you're going to go to college. What are your plans? There's this and this. And so I had no idea what being a piano major meant or what it was all about. But I was like, yeah, I'm doing piano in college. Yeah, let's do this. And so
nice.
We figured it out and we went for it. So.
I don't think I found out what it was going to be like until I was maybe 15 or 16. Yeah, I started studying with a great teacher maybe when I was around 12 or 13 years old. And I'd been taking lessons before, but then like transitioned to, a higher level teacher. And it was quite the awakening. And I'm not going to tell that whole story today, but like I had no idea the difference between like local competitions that like everybody in the studio did, the local competitions, whatever. I was in Illinois, so I think it was like IMEA or something. And between that and then going to like the stuff I had never heard about that was happening all around me, there were like competitions in downtown Chicago and at Symphony Hall and at other places. And by the time I even learned that stuff was happening, I was older than everybody else. And yeah. I mean, the gist of the story is like one of the first competitions I did like that. I think I was 15 or 16, and I only heard it was like a behind the screen kind of competition. The judges couldn't see the performers, and I felt great about playing and all that. Like I was very confident teenager. Yeah. And then I finished, and I went from backstage, and I came out to like the lobby in front of the hall, and I could hear the next contestant playing. And I looked in and I was like, that's really good. And I'm looking and I'm like, he's like 10 years old. What? And I knew in that moment, I didn't have a chance. at winning, and that completely changed like my practice focus and discipline and all kinds of other things. It was that moment of like finding out you're not that good.
Yeah, and I didn't get that. I didn't get that realization really until college, because again, I was also very confident. And Idaho, bless its heart, where I was, it just there's those opportunities are much harder to find.
Yeah.
And even when you find them, that's not ever going to be the same situation as a Salt Lake or a Chicago
right.
or
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So mine came later, and it was a little rough.
Rough, well, we have that experience together.
You need it.
Living
you need
through
it.
that.
You need that kick in the pants too.
Right. So then I guess, so from undergrad and beyond, it was just kind of, this is the path. And
yeah. I remember having a conversation with my teacher in undergrad, and I even remember saying, I don't sound like this particular person. You know, everybody has like this standout person in their brain. And I remember saying to my teacher, I don't sound like them. And I want to, and if you have to yell at me, then I want you to do that. Like, because I want this, and I want to go to a really good university for my master's program. And like, it was important to me that he understood that this wasn't just a good time for me.
Yeah. You really wanted it to be a career, and you already knew. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are a lot of people in their bachelor's degree that don't, they definitely don't know what they might be great at music or good and have a passion for it, but they really don't know that they want to do it. I've taught some students that are already college age, but they want to transition from another major into being a music major. And it's a very eye-opening experience when we have those like adult talks.
Yeah.
Like what? Yeah. So were you ever in a position where you didn't think you would get like a doctorate in music, or you went straight from master's into doctorate, right?
Yeah. So I had kind of an unusual year. I did 4 years of bachelor's, graduated, and then I actually stayed at BYU 1 extra year and started my master's program there because I had gotten married and my husband had 1 year left. Mm-hmm. So I kind of did like a 5-year bachelor's degree, even though I graduated after the 4.
Sure.
And then after that 1 year of halfway master's, that's when I transitioned. I auditioned and went straight to Indiana from that without any break. Mm-hmm. And then from Indiana, 2 years for the master's, and then straight to ASU for the doctorate. So I went as straight through as you can go. Never took any time for anything.
Do you feel good about that decision that you made, or do you like regret not having? You feel good about that? I do. It was what needed to happen for my family. Mm-hmm. I never felt like time off would ever be beneficial for me as far as like my learning and my progress. Yeah. And then by the time I was in the doctoral program, my husband and I had started a family. And so it was kind of like, I have this 18-month-old by the time I'm doing my last doctoral recital. And I needed to be done with that phase of my life. Yeah. Of being a student. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you're always a student, but I really did need to be done with that in order for me and my husband to, accomplish our family goals.
Sure. So, yeah. I mean, it's more of a transition from like full-time student into part-time student. Yeah. Because I think, everyone in music, I think it's a lifelong process. It never goes, the learning never stops.
Absolutely.
So, do you have 2 kids or 3 kids?
I have 2.
2. Okay.
Yeah. 2 little boys.
It's a little. We're going to come back to that later on today.
Great.
So after all of this time studying, you founded Hammer and Strings Conservatory in Gilbert, Arizona. It's in Gilbert, or is it in Mesa? It's in Gilbert.
It's in Gilbert.
Okay. So you founded the conservatory, and you're a piano faculty. You teach at the conservatory. Obviously, you'd been teaching prior to founding the school, but what struck you? Like, what was the impetus behind going from maybe being just a teacher to being a business owner and running a full studio and still teaching, but also like having all of these other teachers under you and coordinating, the plethora of events and recitals and programs and all that?
Yeah.
What was the impetus behind making that decision?
That's a great question. So all the way through all of my degrees, I wasn't entirely sure exactly what it would look like, but I knew that teaching would be a huge part of my life. Sometimes I did not love teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there.
Yeah.
But I knew down to my bones that teaching was going to be a huge part of my life. And so even though I wasn't a pedagogy major, I was doing performance full throughout.
Right.
I spent a lot of time paying a lot of really close attention to teaching styles of both my teachers and other teachers that, I was in association with. And I had a very clear idea of the type of teacher that I wanted to be. And a lot of that was molded and shaped by the opportunities that I did not have as a youth.
Okay.
And so, it's not any one particular teacher's fault at all. I mean,
Sure.
A lot of it is just situational and location and things like that. But I did, when I got out of the doctorate, I had a very clear idea of the type of teacher that I wanted to be. And I had been teaching throughout all my degrees.
Okay.
I had a small studio ever since my undergrad.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, I started going, I wanted to be a very high level teacher, but also the type of teacher that, is motivating and inspiring, and not just work harder, Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started teaching this way, and it wasn't long before I had a wait list.
Nice.
And I don't particularly love wait lists. I don't.
Well, sure. I mean, it's not really serving anybody, but
exactly.
I mean, yeah.
And I would send them to other teachers in the Valley, and just be like, you got to go somewhere. I can't take you right now.
Yeah.
And most of the time, they were coming back and saying, it didn't work. It didn't work. They were great people, great teachers, but it wasn't what they were looking for. And I was starting to offer something. It was the realization that you could do more, you could go further, look what you can do with this. And I started.
And there was a need. You saw a need in Phoenix itself, the area.
And any other teachers that I really felt like and had experience with that were doing the same type of teaching, they were also completely full. So I would try to send students to other teachers, and they're full, and so there wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had 2 little kids. I couldn't take on more. I had a fairly small studio, like 15 was like my max.
Yeah.
And that's not a huge studio.
No. You're going to be blown away by this. I met a gentleman local to me in Colorado when I first moved here last year. And he told me recently he cut back on his teaching a bit, and he has 60 students himself.
Oh, mercy.
And that's cut back from 100 in every week. I don't even makes my heart go a little crazy thinking about that.
Oh no, like palpitations here.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I hear you. 15 is already a lot, especially when you have other commitments.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm the type of teacher that when I send a student out, I'm drained.
Oh yeah, because
what I
every
mean?
lesson is, it's full gas for the teacher. Yeah, and it has to be.
I don't do 30-minute lessons. I either do 45, 60, or 75.
Yeah.
And so each student, I can only do about 3 students in a row before I have to have a break. Like I have to regroup, recharge.
Sure.
Because it's intense, but it's exciting. And, there's a lot going on.
Do you have those moments where you don't realize how focused you've been and how much energy you've been putting out until it's over? Like you have your 2 or 3 students and they're back to back, and then you have that little bit of breather time and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What have I been doing?
My husband knows those moments because if it's at the end of my day, I have about a 20-minute drive home. And so sometimes we're on the phone, and if I've had one of those, I'm just going 100 miles an hour. Oh, and then we did this. And today we found out, and he's just like, whoa.
I relate to that. I haven't taught that many students in a day necessarily. I've always kept my studio a bit smaller because I do all kinds of stuff. But I can relate to that because of teaching choir rehearsal for 2.5 hours, no break.
Yes.
and it was late at night. And so I'd go from 6 until 8:30 or so. And then everybody gets dismissed, or I'd answer some more questions for the people that want to stick around a little longer, and I'll say, fine, I'll give you some extra time. And then it's 9 o'clock, and I'm driving home, and I call my wife, and my brain is still going as fast as it had to go to like keep everybody engaged and excited. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I definitely know what that feels like.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there was kind of like mounting frustration. And as I got more and more well-known, I had more and more people interested. And I was trying to tell people, I can't even look at you until next school year.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to anyone. And so my husband and I just kind of started playing around with some ideas. I realized that there had to be more teachers like me out there, but either they didn't have a place to teach, or the finances to get a really nice instrument. And as well as I do that in order to teach really high level students, you have to have a high level instrument.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. And so, we just started playing around with the idea of, well, what if we found a way to do this, and found the other teachers, the other students that are coming out of university with, really high ideals of what they want to be and are excited about this. And it just kind of one thing led to another, and my studio turned into a school. That was
that's great though. Great. It seems like a very natural progression, both for you, for the students, and now also for the rest of the faculty too. You've kind of melded all of those things together in a way that works. It benefits everybody. Sounds like. Yeah. That's really the nice
idea.
Yeah. What would you say? What's your breakdown of like? Maybe studio-wide, like how many beginner students versus intermediate versus advanced students? Because we both know that you can still teach at a high level to a beginner.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a big difference between like a beginner lesson and a really well-constructed beginner lesson.
Yes.
So,
I have a 4-year-old right now. I have a 4-year-old student. I'm really, really picky with 4-year-olds. If they're that young, they have to be with the right family and the right family environment.
Yeah.
So usually the only 4-year-olds that I'll take, or in every blue moon, there's an older 3-year-old. Very, very rare. Right. But usually it's people that have had parents that are music majors.
Oh, okay.
Or things like that, where the parent understands the amount of accountability that's on the parents' shoulders, and the atmosphere in the home. If it's a typical family that's just like, music is so cool, let's try this. I love those students. I mean, a lot of my students started that way, but I probably wouldn't take them as a 4-year-old. Yeah. It's more of a culture for when they're that young.
And having that extra understanding, especially because your schedule is completely full.
Yes. Yeah. And the 4-year-old also has to be mature enough to sit for 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Sure. So it's a combination of all different things. Yeah. So I have probably 2 beginners right now, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. Mm-hmm. And then the big bulk of almost every studio is going to be that intermediate. Mm-hmm. And then I also have, almost every year I have one student of my 13 to 15 students that's auditioning to become a piano major.
Oh, nice. That's always exciting.
Yeah. The last 3 years, I've had students that have ended up piano majors. This year, I have one that's she's going to go to ASU and study with Baruch.
Oh, awesome.
And so, it's really great. So I usually have at least one that's on that track that keeps going through the intermediate phase.
Do you get just as jazzed for the beginner lessons as you do like for the super advanced one? I mean, they're obviously totally different.
They are very different. I can only handle 1 or 2 very beginners at a time, because the energy level is higher. And it's different energy level. And so for me to be able to maintain that high level, I can only have 1 or 2 a week. Yeah. That's just me personally. I love them. And really the thing that energizes me is constant progression. And so that's where I actually really love the intermediate and late intermediate students, because usually when they get to that point, they're either ready to break into advanced or they kind of fall off. Right.
Yeah.
That's the breaking point. And most of the students that come to me are the ones that are like, let's do this. And that is so exciting to me. I kind of feel like that might be one of my specialties is that taking that late intermediate student and breaking them into being an advanced player.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. I love that.
I love it. And then, of course, the ones that are advanced, they're great. In some ways, like I said, in some ways, they're easier. They know how to practice. They don't need me to be like jumping up and down and screaming their energy. And
right.
Anyway, so yeah.
Tell us a little bit about. I know you have a performance space in the studio. How important is that to have your own versus having to go somewhere else and book it? So tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell us about the piano that's in there.
Awesome. So Charles, you've lived in Phoenix.
Yes.
You lived here for a long time, so you're going to know what I'm talking about.
15 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was teaching, it just before I started the school, there was a very obvious lack of great places for students to perform.
Okay.
There were a couple, but either they were, I'm in the East Valley of the Phoenix Metro, and the one or two that I found, either they had a really subpar piano on the stage, or they were a 45 to 60 minute drive for most of my students. Right. And I'm sure that even me saying that, you know where I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. To put Phoenix in perspective for people that don't know it, it's like 3 hours to drive from one end of the city to the other.
Huge urban sprawl.
So it's massive. So 60 minutes of driving actually only gets you part of the way across town. Believe it or not. A lot of that freeway.
That's a lot of 60 minutes is on the freeway.
On the freeway doing 65, 70 miles an hour. Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge city. So yeah, for people that aren't familiar with Phoenix, and to have a city that big that doesn't have a plethora of performing spaces available like to the public in a sense.
Yeah. And you would find a place, if you found a place that had a gorgeous piano for the type of instruction and experiences that we were trying to have, the cost was completely prohibitive. I don't know a lot of private teachers that can pay $600 to $800 every recital.
Yeah.
To rent out a space.
Right.
And so
because do you charge students for like a recital fee, or is that just a part of their program?
No, when they study at our school, they get to use the recital space. That's part of what that's part of their experience.
Right.
So, so that was actually really important to me when I was thinking about the school, because there just needed to be a better place. And in order, for all the music teachers in the area, there needed to be more options. I mean, millions of people here, and I can count on one hand the spaces that I felt like I could actually use.
Right.
And so anyway.
I mean, I was a bit lucky in that the church where I worked, we had a fantastic piano. And it was a huge space really for a recital. I could seat over 500 people. And I mean, that would,
but it was also,
it was not central at all. Yeah. It was a long way away. So yeah. For people that were local to that area, it was fantastic. And for everybody else, it was not.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the other thing that I kind of said to Matt was, Matt is my husband, sorry.
Random. Yeah.
But, I just said, if we don't have a piano that can make this worth it, it's not even worth opening a recital hall. And so before we even found our space, the opportunity arose to, we heard about this 9-foot concert Busendorfer, an Imperial Busendorfer that was being sold. And it was, what's the word? Anyway, there had been a death, and the family was trying to get rid of this.
Was it like an estate sale?
Yes.
Kind of like that?
Yes. So, it was basically being sold on consignment.
Oh, wow. For a piano. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And you can imagine it's very difficult to sell a 9-foot concert grand.
Sure.
Cost number one, but there's not a lot of venues.
You have to have it. Yeah. If it's going to a home, it has to be a massive room.
Yeah.
to fit it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most even huge homes are going to choose the 7-foot option.
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
my husband and I had literally, we had just sold a house, and we were able to pick up this Busendorfer before I had even started the school or found a space to put it in.
Sure.
But it was that important to me that the students have the ability to perform on that quality of an instrument. Because like we've said, like without an instrument that can do what we're trying to do, it's hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's so cool. I mean, I had, I think, one chance to play the piano.
Yes.
Yeah. The piano has a nickname, right?
His name is Franz because the Busendorfer is an Austrian brand. And of course, the greatest pianist to come out of Austria, or well, I guess you can argue that, but
yeah. I would agree with that. I would agree that it's Liszt.
Franz Liszt, yes. And so Franz is the piano, and our recital hall is the Liszt recital hall.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it was really a really happy series of coincidences and timing, and everything just came together like a dream.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like we could have you on again at some point just to talk about the business side in particular of running a studio and everything that it's involved. I mean, that would be great if you'll come back sometime. We definitely don't have time today, I don't think, to go into that, but yeah, that would be fantastic to talk about that at some point. And I think that would be really enlightening to a lot of people that want to open their own space, something like that. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, leave a comment below, and ding the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And now let's get back to the interview. This might be the first really difficult question of the day, but
Ready.
What do you think is the difference, or makes the difference, between a good piano teacher and a really great piano teacher?
That's an important question. It's kind of difficult, but it's really important. So over my years at the university, and I'll just talk about my time at university.
Sure.
I have had some of the most incredible pianists as teachers that you can find in this country, or in a lot of countries. I'm sure you can relate.
Sure.
You can relate. And few of those teachers that I've had, I think, are really, truly great teachers. Phenomenal, unbelievable pianists, but decent teachers. I think one of the biggest differences to me was their ability and willingness to get down in the trenches with me. I had some technical issues that had to be addressed, and I had teachers that would rather not. And I remember asking 2 different teachers, why do I sound different than this person? I want to sound like that, and I am practicing 6 to 8 hours a day, and I don't sound like that. I was one of the hardest workers that they had.
Yeah.
I mean, and one teacher told me, well, it's just because you didn't have good training when you were young, so there's no going back from that. That was kind of...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was one answer. And the next teacher that I had told me, oh, I can't relate to that at all. I can't help you there. That teacher had world-class training,
from a very young age, probably.
Yes. And she was this teacher was a true prodigy. And had taken lessons from a young age from one of the most famous piano teachers on the planet.
Right.
And so, like I said, probably one of the best pianists that you could ever hear live, and yet had no interest in truly being a teacher.
Or maybe the teaching was only about musicality and expression, but not the whole rest of the package that you need. You need some kind of development to be able to express yourself in the first place. So
yeah. And then I was lucky enough to get a teacher who, even though even though I was fully an adult and well into my piano career, was willing to chop it all down, if you know what I mean, and build it up again. And that was one of the most frustrating and hard couple of years of my piano life. I ended many lessons in tears and many practice sessions, because, you know, when you get that set in your playing and in the things that you do, fundamental changes are not easy. They're not easy at all. And yet I came through those years of serious struggle with the confidence and my own musical voice that, had I not gone through that with that teacher, I wouldn't have had the confidence in my own playing and in my own teaching to be able to do what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so I'm so grateful for those teachers that were willing to get in the trenches with me and say, no, if you really want to do this, it's going to be ugly and we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they were very kind. They were very kind, and they were patient, and they were motivating, and there was not any...
they weren't frustrated.
Yeah, there was no dismissal. It never felt like, well, you should have learned this when you were a kid. I don't know what we're wasting our time on here. You know,
right.
There was none of that. There was none of that.
Yeah, well, that's really nice. Some of the... already, I mean, as a very advanced player, probably in my bachelor's degree at some point, I had some lessons with phenomenal pianists, and the lessons basically amounted to move over, watch me play it, and then they'd play it, and then they'd say, okay, sit down and play it like that. And really, like, some of them I have never heard better performances of pieces live than what I heard these people play and perform. But in lessons, it was there was a lot of like, well, just do it this way.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard? And it was coming from a similar place of like, these were people that were prodigies, that I don't think they ever struggled really. They were beginners at some point. But their beginner was much different than your typical, your typical beginner's path. Because of that, there was just a complete disconnect about that entire bridge. Like, and it's not just getting from like beginner to intermediate. It's getting from beginner to being like a stage performer. All of that seemed to be like missing.
Yeah.
And they could only really talk about the top of the top, like, and they weren't even great at expressing that, but lessons were only about expression and never about anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was lucky and probably a little bit smart. The way I went about it is I was very, like I said, I was hungry and I was competitive. And so I went to as many, like over the summers, I went to many music camps and festivals. And it was at one of those music festivals that I experienced true teaching for the first time, where this teacher, and she was a teacher at Peabody, and she grabbed my hand and did things and showed me things with my hand. And like, I left that, like, I was so blown away. I was so blown away. And of course, these music festivals, I was only there for 2 weeks. And so, I mean, it was enough to give me a taste of it. And I would go back to my school and university and think, okay, now that I know what I'm looking for, they can help me with this. And unfortunately, a lot of the time I didn't get that help. But this is one of the reasons I really, when I have students who are going into university, going to college, wanting to do piano, I basically require that they go and have lessons with different teachers, because they have to understand what's going to happen. Or, some people, you might go have a lesson with a teacher and come out and go, I have no idea what just happened in there. I think I'm better, but I don't know why. And then you also have like oh wow, we got some work done.
Yeah.
And so
So there's
anyway,
also that importance of the student teacher pairing. And that,
yes.
I mean, the style from both sides needs to be a good fit for it to really be the best possible experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after I actually followed that Peabody teacher to a couple more festivals after that, because I literally just wanted to be back in her studio. And I knew immediately after having those experiences that that was the type of teacher I wanted to be. I didn't have the tools yet to be that type of teacher, but that changed everything for me.
Sure.
And then, like I said, I did finally find a teacher that was willing to go on that journey with me. And they're still a mentor, and they are still somebody I look up to highly and train with even still.
Right. Because it's a lifelong process, right? Like we said at the beginning. So boiling it down, it's a great teacher is somebody that's willing to dig with you, like to get their hands dirty and be like, well, this isn't all so glamorous, but we need to do it. Something like
they are willing to go with you where you want your goals to take you. And not everybody wants to get down in the nitty-gritty, and that's fine. That's important to have a teacher that matches those goals too. Right.
So a great teacher sees the goals of the student and can accommodate them no matter the direction.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that. I feel good about that. You mentioned something about practice time. I heard a little snippet of practicing 6-8 hours a day. Do you think, well, two parts to this question. Do you think that much practicing is, one, good, and two, necessary? Why don't we just start with that? Those two things, obviously, for really advanced students.
So I have two parts to this question. There were things that did for me that nothing else could have done. But also I was desperate and I didn't know what else to do. So this started when I was in my undergrad, and like we've already kind of talked about, I heard everybody else and I was like, I'm going to do that. And the only way that I knew how to do that was more time. Okay. That was the only way I knew how to do. In most high level undergraduates, you are required to do about 4 hours a day.
Yeah, I think that's like your typical.
That's pretty common. Yeah. I think that's pretty safe to say.
Yeah.
And I knew that was not going to catch me up or let me pass everybody else. So I was doing 1 hour to 2 hours a day of pure technique. Oh, wow. And I will say that, number one, I did start to have some issues with pain.
Okay. Was that do you think now looking back, was that because of technique, or was it because of just the length of time that you were like?
I think it was a little bit of both.
Okay.
I didn't have terrible technique.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, but I also was, that was probably too much strain on my body. I'm not a real big person. And you have to take into account your body structure and all of those types of things. Right. So, but one thing that did do is, man alive, I got scales and arpeggios that just kicked the pants off of everybody else. And it really, really helped with my strength and endurance. Okay. And so, I mean, those were some good things that came out of it. And I did have a teacher that would, if I had questions and everything, that they would help me with that. As I got older and even more serious and, got married and had kids, I didn't have 6 to 8 hours a day, but you learn how to practice differently. And so now when I want a practice session, now I'm lucky to get 1 hour, but right. I do a lot more with that hour than I used to. Right. It's more efficient. And yes. And I think you're right in that a huge part of that is understanding your own body. And I mean, one, it's current limitations and knowing not to push it too hard, but also knowing the stage, that you're at with your repertoire and what's going to happen. And yeah, I think I only practiced 8 hours in a day. I think I did that for 1 week in my undergrad. And it wasn't even because I felt like I was behind. I just wanted to see what it was like. And I did it for 1 week, and I knew after that week was over, I would never do it again.
ever. Like, it didn't
Sure.
matter what direction my life took me. Even if I was a full-time concertizing performer, there was no way, like, there was no life. My life didn't have a life. I sat in a practice room, like an 8x8 practice room with a piano and barely a window all day.
Yeah.
And then the more I learned about music, the more I learned, like, well, I need experiences to draw on. So I know the story I'm telling to people, and I'm not going to get those sitting in a practice room. There's no way.
Yeah. And I will be clear, I never did stretches like that. I would start at 6 a.m.,
Oh,
have
yeah.
class at 8 a.m., practice in between, next class, things like that. But yeah, it was definitely not something that somebody told me to do. It was my own personal thing. Like I said, it was very competitive, and I was very driven, and I was also very angry about not being the type of pianist that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I was really trying to figure it out on my own.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but honestly, I truly do feel like in a lot of ways, because I did that, because I was able to get into a school like Indiana. I mean, I wasn't at the level, again, in my own opinion, I truly wasn't at the level that I thought the other master's students were at.
Right.
But by dang, I worked hard enough to get there. And then again, that was kind of my experience also in Indiana. It was not a great experience with the type of teaching that I needed, but because I was willing to do that type of work, I grew in enough other ways to get me where I needed to be for the next level.
Sure. And I think that even goes back to our previous point about what you're doing at Hammer and Strings, and why it's so important for kids, because you're even talking now about a master's level program that where the students have difficulty applying, let's say, lessons to the actual music, because there's this bridge that hasn't been created, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that in some ways my teacher was like, well, she's not the same as my other students, so we'll just do what we can for her, and then she'll move on. You know, I don't know. I'm not really sure what the thought process was there, but but also at the time, like, and I have to take some responsibility. I might not have been clear in expressing my needs, or, you know, and a lot of the times I don't even know what my needs were. I could see a problem, and she maybe had a different solution to the problem. It was yeah.
Right. Going back to the amount of practice time, do you have, so if we look at it from a different perspective, like, let's say an intermediate student, do you have a recommended amount of time that you think is great for somebody at that level? And give us an idea, like, what a piece of music that maybe an intermediate student is working on, because intermediate means different things to different people.
Sure. Let's see. A lot of my intermediate students are working on longer sonatinas, maybe introductory sonatas, but we're really very much focusing on much more advanced types of things in these intermediate pieces.
So it's like, sounds like something that the notes don't take as much time to learn, but you have so much more opportunity to talk about musicality, phrasing, dynamics, and articulation.
And a lot of my students that are intermediate level, I'm asking them to practice close to 2 hours a day, an hour and a half to 2 hours a day.
I'm surprised.
And of course,
that's cool.
I'm also human, and so I understand that that's not going to be possible every single day of every week, you know, but I do have students that are putting in that type of time. I also have students that are not. And, you know, it has to be something that they want as well. But as long as they continue to progress really steadily and really consistently, then I don't harp on the time. Right. Well, I give them kind of a reality check of what it takes. Once you start playing longer pieces, you can't practice 30 minutes. Sorry.
Right. Oh yeah, the piece itself is longer than 30 minutes.
Even if the piece is 8 minutes, you know what it takes to put together an 8-minute piece. That's no picnic.
No.
I
mean, you would never get there with only 30 minutes.
Right.
Or at least it would, or if you did, it would take years instead of a reasonable amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I give them reality checks, and then we base what we do on the amount of progress that they come back. Some students are able to make remarkable progress in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Some students are not. And it
Right.
doesn't have anything to do with usually their level of talent, but maybe just their level of focus.
Right.
Maybe it has to do with their instrument that they're working on at home.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it has to do with their environment that their instrument is sitting at home.
Yeah.
So there's
Right.
a lot of
Right. Yeah, I understand all that. That's a whole. We won't go into the rest of that today, but that would be a whole discussion in itself.
yeah.
So, are there any moments with your own teachers that you look back on as super formative? I'm guessing we're going to kind of jump to one of your latest teachers. We've talked about the moments that were not so great, but are there moments that you pass on to students now that you had with your teachers, or moments that you look back on and you reference a lot, maybe when you're practicing?
Yeah, there are a few moments, and I have to say honestly, some of my experiences with my other teachers that were really frustrating actually were huge building moments as well.
Okay.
And so, because either I had to figure out a way to do it, which means if I figured out a way to do it, then I am that much more capable of teaching it.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
But I do think one of my most formative moments was with my last teacher. And he was asking me to do some things that were very, very uncomfortable. I feel like as a pianist, as a musician, I'm a very emotional performer. I don't think about stories or colors or anything like that. I connect to emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that he was asking me to do were making me feel very, very disconnected from that playing. And so I felt very lost.
Uh-huh.
And I struggled for months and months trying to figure out what was happening. And I was feeling like a failure. We've all been there.
Yeah.
And, but because of all of the struggle, there was this one time in a practice room that I had the thought, lower your bench. And I mean, I'm a doctoral student at this point. Let's not, bench should not be one of those things
that you're still figuring out.
Right. And I did some things. I played around with some things. I lowered my bench and everything just came together.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the thing that I try to teach my students about this is that there is not one magic solution.
Mm-hmm.
And without putting in the time, if I had just given up on that or just been like, never, what he's asking me to do isn't worth it. I could not have made that. Even if he had just told me at the very beginning of this struggle, well, lower your bench a little bit, I don't think it would have done what it needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't had the time to sit and struggle and stew with everything that was happening. And it all came together at the right time after I had put in the work.
Right. Yeah.
And
I think that's something, we're talking about, it's not really an advanced concept. Bench height is not an advanced concept.
No.
But I think it can apply, the idea of just this, the focus and the determination can apply to like everything. All practice moments.
Yeah. And I think that a lot more these days than maybe even when you and I grew up, parents are a little bit uncomfortable with frustration and discomfort.
Oh yeah.
And so but in the arts, you kind of live there.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's true. I had a student of mine would come in and high school age and be just regularly very frustrated with like progress and things. And there was a point fairly early on in our working together that I told him, look, and he's old enough to understand this, but I said, look, you're taking lessons because we're on a journey. You're not at the end. It's not perfect. Yeah. I didn't tell him it'll never be perfect.
Right.
But I said, look, that's why we're together. And being frustrated is okay. That's my job, is to help you through that. As your teacher, I'm never going to come in and put you down for being frustrated. And I'm not going to be frustrated that maybe you're frustrated, but I want you to show me that you are, number one, and then let's talk about it. But just like most importantly, know that it's okay.
Yeah.
And really taking lessons is about the journey. It's about the process. It's not about, we get those cool moments where we get to perform and stuff as students, but it's really about just like the daily living and all the exploration that happens in the midst of all that.
Yeah. If you're not experiencing frustration in your practicing, you're not progressing.
Yeah.
I because
I think that's true.
It's rough. So
yeah,
that is one of the moments that I share a lot with my students. Because like I said, I was a fully grown adult. I was married. I was starting a family, and here I am crying at lessons because, and crying in my practice sessions because I'm so frustrated about what's not working. But there's light on the other end of the tunnel. When you sludge through those times, on the other side are these amazing moments.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah. Cool. I love that story. So a couple questions left for you today. So we both know that there are all kinds of different ways of practicing, let's say. There's, like slow practicing or practicing in groupings, mental practice, technical practice that we've talked some about today. Is there one that stands out to you as like the most important, that you think is the most important for yourself or for students? Or would you say that you have to find a balance that works? Or
I definitely think it's a balance, and it's all of those things at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of my job as the teacher is to teach the student what type of practice is going to be effective at what stage of their piece.
Mm-hmm.
At the very beginning, a whole lot of there are certain types of practice that are not going to be super effective.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that they won't benefit later or that they won't be beneficial. But, at the beginning, you need to be in the trenches, in the notes, lots of repetition, memorizing the sound of the notes in your ear, memorizing the melody, those types of things. Right. At the very beginning of the piece, you should not be worrying about, did I do that dynamic, appropriately, So there's and all the different types of practicing that you mentioned, I use constantly. But we use them at different times. And so what I'm trying to teach my students is what problems can be attached to what solutions. Mm-hmm. If you're having a lot of problem playing a particular passage, if it's a fast passage, then what are the types of practice that are going to attach to that? If you're having a lot of problems in a slow and lyrical piece, chances are the solution is going to be quite different.
Yes. Yep.
So
how much do you
take that job very seriously.
How much do you have students? Do you have like a syllabus or do you follow one of the programs about technical, like scales, arpeggios, stuff like that? Do you go through any of those, or do you do?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. Hammer and Strings Conservatory, actually, we make our own technique program. Now, I will say for sure that our technique program has been influenced by other technique programs. When we were putting this together, we were looking at what was considered for like Royal Conservatory, what was considered for ABRSM, what things have we done just in our own personal studies, in my own personal experience, technique programs that any of my previous teachers had done. And so we do things like we'll do pieces of Hanon sometimes. But taught, I saw a recent video of you. Awesome. Go check out his Hanon video. Hanon is one of those people, some teachers are very anti, some teachers are very pro. And I have no problem with Hanon if it's done right. Right. And if it's done with thought and care. Right. And I think that has a lot to do with what your video was talking about. So anyway, so we use pieces of Hanon. We use pieces of like Louis Plady even. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those exercises. No. And so like there's lots of things that we pull together. And then so we have a leveled technique program that's just for HNS. Okay.
Nice. Cool. Shifting gears a little bit here. You're a performer. Both as a soloist and in your trio, Salonnieres. Now, we've talked about your large studio of students that you manage, and you have a family and 2 kids. Is there like a magic to managing all of that, or how do you manage all of it, and the emotion on all of the sides, and the time? And
that's a great question, and it's a little bit of a tricky question. First of all, is that I love all the things that I do. Mm-hmm. If there was an aspect of any of that I didn't love, I would drop it in a hot minute.
Yeah.
Because it has to feed you.
Yes.
In order to keep it up at this level. The second thing that I will say is that it's a family affair. Mm-hmm. Both the school and my performing. My kids have grown up with nothing but me doing performing and musical things since the day they were born. Mm-hmm. So they understand what it is that mom does. And I definitely have help. I have people that run the office at H&S. Yeah. I have people that help me with childcare when I need it. Mm-hmm. Our Salonnieres, our performance group, we have it kind of down to a science of when times of years that we're able to perform, because my other 2 group members are also incredibly busy, wonderful women and mothers. Yes. And and so I don't know that. I think the term balance, how do I balance it all, it's kind of misleading, because I don't. What I do is I pick things that are important. Sure. Yeah. And so I have my core of the things that are the most important to me. Right. And those are always the core. And then at different times and different periods of my life, the other things take control. The last 2 years, H&S has been, I guess it's almost 3. H&S has been one of those things that my first priorities. When I have performance coming with Salonnieres, then I have to, Sure. turn that focus to a little bit of a different place, but you can't do it all, and nobody does. And if they tell you that they're lying. Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's a combination of really loving everything that you have going on. I mean, that's awesome to hear, that just you get to go from one part of your life to the next, and it's always, it's always that passionate,
a different part of you. Yeah. I don't think that I could just teach and never perform. I think that would feel totally lopsided. Mm-hmm. And I honestly feel the other way too. I had at one time in my life considered trying to just do the concert artist route. And it didn't take long for me to realize that was not, it wasn't that tempting to me. Right. There were other things that I wanted more. Mm-hmm. And so by having a little bit of each, it actually keeps me balanced, and it's able to feed me in just the different ways that I need.
Right. And I would imagine too, being someone that, I don't have I have a wife, but I don't have kids. I can't even imagine my life. But I do have a lot of stuff going on, and I find that like all the different things, they end up feeding each other. And like I learn something in one place, but then it's something that influences, other things that I do. So
I don't feel like I could, in good conscience, teach these kids about performance and what they have to do to perform if I didn't have to put myself through it as well. And vice versa. I learn things when I'm teaching. Sometimes something will come out of my mouth and I'm like, hey, that's good. I need to try that in my own playing. Yeah. So
cool. So one more question, Karali, today. When I was reading through your bio, I saw a note about a presentation you gave at the International Association for Word and Music Studies. And the presentation was called Music and Sexuality. Could you tell us a little bit about the presentation and maybe some of the topics you explored and why you're passionate about it?
Yeah, that was really an interesting, fun thing to jump into. So tiny backstory, my sister is a professor, and she has a PhD in British literature and Irish studies. And so she, as you know, from the beginning, she also grew up playing piano, and she has a very musical background in our home. And she came across the author Charles Griffiths, or is the author-composer. She came across the composer Charles Griffiths, and she kind of started getting interested in him and his music. He's a basically kind of an Impressionist era American composer. And he was a homosexual, and this was back in, the days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when that was, it's not the current,
yes,
not the current
it was a
world.
very, very different climate.
Yeah.
And so, she got really interested in this, but she didn't have the musical background and education to really put together some of the ideas of what that could have done and how that could have influenced some of Griffiths's, interpretations and choices. And so there was this great conference going on, and it happened to be in Arizona that year. Mm-hmm. And she got invited to present it, and she said, let's do this together. So we kind of got to get together. Cool. And I got to analyze the music and, look at the text painting and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then we got to go to this conference and present on it. And it was pretty cool. And it's this cross-discipline collaboration, which is so fun. It is so fun. It really opens your eyes to different things that were happening historically, and even just in the composer's own mind and in their works.
Sure,
and
yeah,
that's kind of what that was. And so her and I do love to do these collaborations whenever possible, because it feeds both of us again.
Awesome. Great to hear.
Yeah.
I think that wraps it up for us today. It has been a pleasure chatting. It's been a lot of fun.
I've loved being here. I love all the things that you're doing with the teaching and the
I appreciate that.
And things like that.
I appreciate
it's so exciting.
It. Thanks again for joining us today. And if you want to learn more about Hammer and Strings Conservatory, you can visit www.hammerandstrings.com, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. I'd highly recommend visiting if you happen to be in the Phoenix area. And I also talked a little bit with Karali before we started today, and virtual lessons are available from anywhere in the world. Just shoot an email over, and you can start a conversation with her. Also, be sure and check out Karali's trio, Salonnieres, at their YouTube channel. I'll leave that link in the description also. Thanks for watching this episode of The Soundboard. Remember, practice smarter, not harder. And I look forward to seeing you again next time you visit Pianist Academy.